Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to Folks and Friends, a podcast by Folks Finance. Here, we invite the brightest builders, creators, and thought leaders to talk blockchain, tech, finance, and everything in between. I'm your host, Ibu. Let's learn something together. Assets discussed on Folks and Friends may be held by participants of the podcast. This podcast is purely educational. Hello. So we're back with Folks and Friends. Super excited for this episode with Chainlink today. Of course, this is a huge episode for us. Great way to bring it back. First, I wanted to, before we get into the Chainlink discussion, I wanted to just kind of welcome everybody. And maybe Ben and I, maybe we can kind of update people on the latest things briefly that we might be talking about today. Give some context to the conversation while we wait for our guest Luke to join the speakers panel. So lately it's been a busy time for Folks Finance. New governance period began. We saw a record number of people participating in the liquid staking on Folks Finance, where you can earn about 18% on your algo, Mint G algo. Of course, that's been big. We have the Ultra Swap new feature, which is a loan multiplier essentially, and we have obviously the Chainlink build program that we're going to talk about. So Ben, what have you been thinking about the last few months for folks? How's it been feeling?
Oh my God, it has been a very busy times. Obviously, we are always bullish, and those markets bumps in those last days, weeks. It's kind of give you the energy, to go faster with more energy. No, but things are great. We are doing, as always, new developments, new innovation, and always more conferences for me as well. So it's very busy, but we try to keep up at the best we can, right?
Yeah, definitely. Especially as a small team, it's we try to do everything, try to play every part of the game. Super demanding, but yeah, as you said, it's feels like finally we're getting some wind in our sails right at the perfect time. As we, gear up for this new product that we're building, the cross-chain lending. I'm sure many of you may have read about it, but we're going to get into that discussion during the space. Once again, everybody, welcome to Folks and Friends. This is the podcast by Folks Finance. I'm Ibu, head of partnerships at Folks, and I'm here with Benedetto Biondi, the CEO of Folks Finance. We like to bring people on, great guests from around the ecosystem, talk about the projects that they're doing, get perspectives from places that we may not have heard before, and hopefully you enjoy it. Of course, this space is on X Spaces, or this podcast is recorded on X Spaces, but you can find it on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube as well. So if you want to find previous episodes, check those out on the Folks Finance channels. You can just look up Folks and Friends. Let's get into it. Today, our guest is Luke, who is the BD for Chainlink build program and does partnerships for Chainlink CCIP. So we're really excited to have a representative from Chainlink here. Really excited to talk to Luke about Chainlink and the build program and various other things that we might be interested in coming in 2024. Luke, welcome to the space. And yeah, say hi to everybody so we can get into the convo.
Hey, Ibu. Hey, Ben. Good to meet you guys. Hope my audio is doing well.
Yeah, great to have you here. So, we're going to get into some discussion. And at first, can you just introduce yourself a little bit? How did you come to this position of working at Chainlink? How'd you get started in the crypto industry? I feel like it's always a story.
Yeah, it's a story indeed. Not sure that I have the most eventful story compared to the rest. But it's great to meet you, and especially I think we just came back from SmartCon as well. Together with Ben, who was speaking at the panel. So good to see the different initiatives that we are working on together. It's a pleasure and honor to be in this space. So maybe a bit of myself. So I'm part of the go-to-market team here at Chainlink Labs, and largely responsible for both CCIP go-to-market strategy as well as the build program as well, right? And I think we go quite way back, given that we have been working alongside from the very beginning with Ben and team, right? With regards to exploring synergies with the build program, having you guys been on board the build program as well, and then it's so good to see that the relationship is deepening. And as you guys are planning ahead to expand into EBM space as well, more than happy to be a part of that. A bit about myself. So I first came into crypto and blockchain. I think my first knowledge about it was back in 2017. And I think back then it was when during the up market, right? And with that, we do see, I was learning about it back in my university days under the fintech course, right? And I think that was when I knew about how blockchain works, right? And with that, got experience into the crypto space in general. But I think back then, there was a lot of vision that was put out. Also pretty speculative in terms of the market. Back then, we don't see as many use cases. DeFi summer hasn't really kicked into place, right? So I wasn't fully convinced about the technology. So I didn't really go full in. I only went in really more so in like 2020, where we all saw, right? COVID hit, right? And that was when the quantitative easing, as well as the expansion of money supply within the system. And that was also when I think prior to Bitcoin halving, there was this narrative about Bitcoin's relevance with its hard money thesis, and that coupled together with the inflation of global monetary supply, right? I think that was when I do see a lot of traction, not just on Bitcoin, but also development and innovation that's been happening across the blockchain. Ethereum was by far, I think back then, one of the chains that really took off, right? In terms of use cases, DeFi summer kicked into play. And then that's when I really went deep in, right? Back in 2020. And yeah, I mean, happy to share more about my previous roles, but I think it's pretty boring. But yeah, let me know.
So what, 2020 obviously was a big time in the crypto industry, especially with COVID. What effect did you think the pandemic had on driving adoption in the crypto industry from your perspective?
Yeah, great question. So I think the pandemic really kicked into play in terms of Bitcoin as an asset, right? In terms of its role within the financial system as a monetary asset, right? But I think that was also the period in time where you have industries that were anchored on paper promises like Robinhood, right? We see more and more of such instances where they back out of their paper promise, right? So like what happened in Robinhood was the whole situation with Citadel. I'm not sure whether you guys are familiar. I think COVID really, maybe everyone was had too much free time. And that really drove a lot of people to understand more about investment and stock market, etc. And that was when Robinhood took off, right? And with that, we have also then seen as Robinhood took off, one of the key things that we have also seen is that people didn't understand the business model of Robinhood, right? People just think of it, oh, it's a free trade, right? I don't have to pay any form of fees. They don't understand that Robinhood needs to have revenue somewhere, right? They just see the benefits. Up until the point where the entire situation with Citadel, right? And people start to realize, like, I thought I could trade your platform. Why am I now being a consumer, right? I mean, they typically have this term that says, if you don't understand the business model or where the money comes from, you are probably the business.
Correct,
right?
correct.
So you're So I think that really drove the need for DeFi as well, right? That there is a need where we need to move away from paper promises, where it's driven by code. Obviously, then you need to have reliable code, right? That's tried and tested. But once you have those code that's put into place, like what we see, Fox Finance being one of them, right? But many of the other DeFi protocols that you see right now, right? These are anchored by smart contracts, and they can't be changed. And they can't be changed by any single party if, let's say, the governance process is very much decentralized across.
Yeah, definitely. And
also, Ibu, let me add a quick part on this. It's a very interesting point of view, this one of Luke, and reflecting also on one of the driver that during the pandemic time probably also boosted the Web3 in general, is that if we think about Web3 teams, they are mostly decentralized, right? And during the pandemic, we had the push of remote working. So some of the dynamic that before would push a startup to have, say, an in-house team that could go to the office were broken from the new dynamic of having the remote working. So many Web3 teams would easily, in an easier way, being able to team up, right? That is also a thing that I would consider during the pandemic for the growth of crypto projects.
Definitely normalizing the global office in a way, the digital office. We work remotely at Folks. We have people all over the world. I don't think we would be able to get nearly as much done if we had to be in the same spot at all times.
Yeah, man, especially if I think about Italy, right, where maybe in other teams, like especially in the US, remote working could have been already widely used, but doing calls on Zoom or Meet in Italy wasn't that common before pandemic. It became a necessity, and then like this in country like ours, it could have boosted the adoption, definitely.
Right, and that not only legitimizes remote working, but also legitimizes crypto-based companies as being kind of more of a thing instead of most companies or most projects were just small teams, a few developers, and then with the wide-scale adoption of remote working, I think a lot of teams were able to scale up in a way they couldn't have before. And of course, Luke, you mentioned we got to DeFi Summer, which I think was summer of 2021, and the industry essentially accepted DeFi protocols for the first time in a hype cycle, which was really interesting to see. Of course, things went up and down, but that was probably a lot of the crypto community's first introduction to many more DeFi apps, including AMMs, lending protocols, staking, etc. Ben, how did you meet Luke, and how did you guys get introduced to each other back in the day?
Yeah, so in the beginning of this year with Folks, we started to think how we could expand to other ecosystem. And when we started to think about the cross-chain lending protocol, we started a due diligence over the different messaging layer that we could use. And indeed, we were definitely already interested on CCIP, even though there wasn't much of documentation at this time, but our CTO was saying we should know more about that. And honestly speaking, our first contact with Chainlink, it wasn't really the best until I went to Miami and I met one of the Chainlink Labs team member, and I was telling him what we were gonna do and that we tried to reach Chainlink. And he was like, "I'm super sorry, we are gonna fix this." And he introduced me to Luke. And I must tell that Luke was the first Chainlink team member that let me understood the Chainlink work philosophy, right? I can tell that after Luke, then there was many of his colleagues that we met. So there are a few years like Roman and Zai, which I say hi. Um, then it was a very incredible way of co-working together. I always say that at Chainlink works very good humans. Like they are always happy to support and help in whatever we need. So really, it was a very quick relationship. Then we decided to be part of the build program. Of course, Luke is the reason for this beginning. So that is how this started.
So we have a lot of people from the Chainlink community in this space. Welcome everybody. Hi, how you doing? This may be your first time that you've heard about Folks Finance or been exposed or introduced to us. So Ben, I want to hand it back to you. Just can you give people the overview of what Folks Finance is right now, and then also what we're going to be doing in collaboration with Chainlink as we move into the near future?
Yeah, sure. So Folks Finance is the largest DeFi app currently on Algorand. We aim to offer similar services as a centralized exchange into a DeFi hub. So those services must be simple to use as they are on a centralized exchange, but as well guaranteeing the trust and the reliability and the decentralization of DeFi. So what Folks Finance offers right now is lending, loans, swaps. We have the latest launch, the Ultra Swap, which allows you to hedge on your collateral in order to have a multiplier over the market exposure. And as well, we also offer fiat on and off ramp, but it's an integration. So as you can imagine, also liquid staking, and not forgetting the most important algo here. Again, the idea is to have this DeFi hub as one central point of reference for DeFi users that can have a very good user experience and no need to switch between a protocol and another. So all of this is built on Algorand. We have over $80 million TVL, more than 7,000 active monthly users. And right now, Folks Finance is in an expansion phase. So we found Chainlink CCIP as cross-chain messaging protocol a very useful technology in order to pursue these new developments.
Everybody check out the thread I just put at the top of the space, which will give you a quick textual introduction to Folks Finance as well as Ben's explanation. Yes, we are a DeFi hub, does many things. We started on Algorand and now we are expanding to build a cross-chain lending protocol. Ben, we're going to get more into maybe how that's going to work with CCIP, but I actually want to ask Luke, when you were introduced to Ben and he described the plan of Folks Finance to you, what were your initial thoughts, and how eventually did you bring folks into the build program?
Yeah, absolutely. Got to say, Ben is probably one of the clearest communicators out there within the space, and he knows exactly what he's doing. And I think that's the key reason of how you guys can become one of the largest DeFi protocols, the largest DeFi protocol on Algorand. When I first met Ben, I think back then, I think it was early in the day, CCIP wasn't even out in the market. We were still in beta testing program, I believe. He shared his vision of what he wanted to do, right? Which is basically cross-chain collateral. So for those that don't really understand what cross-chain collateral is, to give an example, let's say you want to deposit as a lending protocol, you have collateral assets on chain A, right? And typically what you have to do right now, under the current lending markets, which is operating in parallel multi-chain systems, you can only borrow collateral out from the chain that you put the collateral in. You can only borrow assets from the chain that you put the collateral in. Right? With cross-chain collateral, powered by CCIP, you basically don't have to bridge any collateral. If let's say I have ETH on Ethereum as an example, and I want to borrow some stables on another chain, let's say an L2, right? I could do it without bridging my collateral across to the L2. A lot more gas efficient for users, right? But also it prevents the cumbersome user experience of having to interact with a third-party bridge, getting out of the debt, bridge funds, wait for funds to reach, and then only then you can go back to the lending protocol to borrow assets, deposit the collateral and borrow assets. Obviously not the best. And I think when he shared that use case, it was a use case that resonated very strongly with us. And with that, back then in the day, we hardly see any form of protocols that are really natively cross-chain. If you look at most of the lending markets right now, even the EVM space, right, they typically operate on a multi-chain model, right? And they encountered huge blockers because their code is very much structured that way. If they need to do a cross-chain collateral, they need to revamp their code base from the very beginning. So we hardly see such innovations within the blue chip OG DeFi protocols on EVMs, right? And that's the benefit, I think, where Fox Finance expanding into EVMs right now, that's really the competitive advantage. And we're happy to provide a secure solution to enable that use case. And we are hugely bullish on that use case.
Yeah, I think we can expand on what Luke just mentioned specifically for the lending protocols. Obviously, one of the main advantages is that you will be able to use Fox Finance with any wallet you prefer, obviously in the supported chain. And the interaction with the protocol and the network that are using underlying are being basically abstracted thanks to CCIP in this case. So the end users is going just to connect the wallet he mostly like, use the assets that he mostly like, and for example, he can collateralize even on the native chain is connecting from, but take a loan that is coming from a totally different chain, even paying the interest there, but never need to know of what are the steps that are undergoing to do certain operation, right? So this narrative, I believe, that is extremely important for the next wave of new DeFi apps that I believe we will see a big rise in the next bull run, because you are basically going over what is the standard multi-chain protocols that Luke described, where in order to move your assets from a chain to another, you need to do all the manual process for closing the position, bridging, and then open it on another side. With the new cross-chain narrative that Fox Finance will use and CCIP is powering in many projects, all of this process of bridging are being abstracted. And one more thing which is very powerful specifically for lending protocol is that you are able to do different operation in different chain. So, for example, in our design, one of the unique design structure that we decided to have is that the stable coins, which are mostly the borrowed assets, are being concentrated into the hub chain. So the hub chain will be having a better utilization ratio. For example, let's say USDC will be concentrated in the hub chain, and the end user is going to be able to take a loan, which is going to affect less the utilization ratio of the pool, even if the loan can be larger compared to a fragmented liquidity model. So if, for example, just to understand, we look at Aave has 10 different chains where the USDC are spread all over. So if we would imagine to squeeze all of these USDC liquidities on the different markets into one, obviously the pool would be much larger and much more stable compared to the same loans that you would take in each single fragmented liquidity chain.
Right, exactly. So it improves the liquidity, improves the user experience. Again, getting closer to that vision of it doesn't matter what blockchain you're using, what you prefer. If you prefer Ethereum, Polygon, Solana, et cetera, you can just log in with a wallet, connect it to another wallet or another chain if you want, and pretty much get the best of the whole package. And then, Luke, I actually want to ask you to if you could provide us some details on how CCIP makes this an even better process, which is, especially relating to the messaging layer instead of wrapping all the assets together and sending them across various chains. How does that make it more lightweight and better for the user in the end?
Yeah, good point. And probably you can see CCIP as really angling on two different aspects, right? So on one aspect, CCIP is a messaging layer, right? On the other aspect, we also do work directly with token issuers so that you can bridge your tokens from one chain to the other, right? So if you look at it on the messaging layer, like what we have just previously mentioned, right, where you deposit collateral on one chain and you borrow funds on another chain that your collateral is not on, there's no tokens being transferred, right? All you're doing is sending a message, right, in terms of the collateral value and the amount that a user can borrow on the chain that he wants to borrow funds from, right? However, back to Ben's example, let's say you want to have an aggregated pool on a hub chain, right? USDC pool for less fragmentation out there. When users want to borrow funds, let's say USDC on a destination chain that is not the hub chain, right? It would then use CCIP, right, to call for USDC to be transferred from the hub, right, into the destination chain, right? So on the user's perspective, I don't care where the USDC comes from. It could all be aggregated in a single hub chain, right, for better liquidity, less fragmentation, right? But ultimately, what's important to me is I receive the USDC that I called for, right, in the chain that I'm on. And that specific example uses both token transfers alongside with messaging, right? Because you need to not just send a message, right, but also send tokens. In this particular case, is USDC from the hub chain to the destination chain. So the good thing about CCIP is that at least on the use case level, it resolves a lot of problems, right? Previously, if you look at all the typical bridges that you see right now within the space, most people are well acquainted with bridges that solely just do token transfers. You have not really seen too much interactions and use cases for messaging because there wasn't really a secure messaging solution out there where protocols can really anchor their entire protocol security on. If you look into the current model in the industry right now, most people just use a third-party bridge, solely just sending tokens, right? But you don't really see protocols anchoring their security on a bridging protocol, right? It's usually standalone. If the bridging protocol gets exploited, right, it's a standalone situation. The tokens locked there will be having issues, right? And I think that's the good thing about CCIP, and that's really what we have gained, what we have been encouraged about, is the fact that we have taken over 3 years to build out this solution, right? And most people think of us like, why do you take so long? 3 years is a long time. CCIP has been spoken about for quite some time. But really, we look into the cross-chain exploits within the space just in the past 2 years or so. I was just looking at some data points. I think it was 2.6 billion that was exploited.
Right.
So our key goal here is really on security. And we built grounds up to ensure that protocols can really anchor their protocol security on a secure messaging and bridging solution.
And how exactly does the technology of CCIP improve security compared to bridges of the past?
Yeah, really. So I think everything lies within, and it's quite well summarized, depicted in what we term as our mental framework of the 5 levels of security, right? So if you can follow me here, right, it would be best if I have a diagram, but obviously I don't, right? So if you can follow me, there is 5 levels of security, and what we term as level 5 being the most secure, the most decentralized solution with minimal trust assumptions, level 1 being the most centralized and having the most trust assumptions there. So level 1, you can think of it, is essentially having one single person, a single entity, right, coming to consensus of the message or tokens supposed to be transferred from one chain to the other, and they execute the transaction, right? So that's what we term as level 1. Level 2 is what we see some of the existing solutions right now. One of the examples, you can think of it as multi-chain, right? Where seemingly it looks decentralized, but if you really go under the hood, you go into the documentations and understand the tech stack, it's a centralized solution, right? So what we have seen for multi-chain was the fact that the CEO and the founder basically holds the key to all the vaults, right? So he is the central point of failure, right? If he goes missing, there goes the protocol. What we see for level 3 is essentially where you have one decentralized network, right? One network that powers every single connectivity with every lane. So you can think of it a bit like a hub and spoke model specific to bridging. And why hub and spoke model don't really work in the bridging point of view, right, is the fact that if, let's say, you're connected with, give an example, 20 to 100 chains out there, right? It is what you would then have to do is that every transaction between each chains will have to flow through that network. And if that network is a blockchain, you will come into things like congestion issues. If you need to do upgrades, right, that network goes down, every connectivity across all chain goes down. If let's say, and that's not secure, by the way, like if let's say you're using a DeFi protocol, you're anchoring like cross-chain liquidations, what happens if they have an upgrade? The network suddenly clocks up, right, and goes down. What happens to your liquidation, right? So it's really not a secure aspect to look into. It doesn't scale as well, right? What we do for level 4 is what you see for price feeds, right? Where you have a decentralized network that powers only one specific service. And in the price feeds set of things, it is one decentralized network that powers one price feed on one chain. So let's say if you're talking about a ETH to USD price feed on Ethereum, is powered by a different network compared to an ETH to USD price feed on Arbitrum, right? So that we use that same model, we added upon it for CCIP, and that's what we term as level 5. Meaning, instead of just having one network, now you have 3 networks, right, that you're trusting, and that's coming to consensus of the messages. You have the committing dawn. I really won't go into specific details, but you basically have 3 networks: committing dawn, executing dawn, and the risk management network. The good thing about CCIP as well is that with the risk management network, basically token issuers can configure the amount of assets that you want to be transferred. You can set in place rate limits, right? So you can configure, let's say if I want to send across, give an example, let's say down the line, the Fox token or USDC from one chain to the other, I can put in place between this chain A to chain B, I only want 1 million tokens, right, to be transferred every 1 hour. And that's something that token issuers themselves has the right and have the flexibility to mitigate the risk of having their assets and tokens across different chains, and they can filter and move that rate limits based on the risk parameters of that chain.
It just adds so much flexibility to what people can build with this tool, which I think is just one of the most impressive things about it. It actually, I want to bring up something which will be in the cross-chain lending, Ben, that we're building. You were mentioning that the USDC will be held on one chain to concentrate the liquidity. However, if you were collateralizing a native token of a chain, let's say you were collateralizing BNB on Binance chain, that would stay on Binance chain if you were using it from that chain. And what's the purpose of this? And what's the power of this decision to have each token stay on the chain that it's native to?
So basically, the idea is that based on the operation that you are doing and on the token that you are using, there might be different dynamics where the token is better to stay on the native chain. For example, thinking of the example that you did, it makes sense that the native asset of BNB chain, BNB, stays there also because of later when liquidation happens, if liquidation happens, to be liquidated where most of the liquidity is. So in that case, of course, it's going to be BNB chain, right? Bridging this over to the hub chain where the USDC are coming from, I would just add, first of all, more expenses because you would need to do this transaction, but as well more risks, and it would be useless. So that is the idea of having this flexibility that you can do based on the operation that you're doing. And then, of course, also there might be special cases where a user may want to have this in the hub chain, so he could customize the operation in order to do that as well. And one very interesting thing that we could mention is that, for example, for the USDC transfer is going to be used directly CCTP. So in that case, we will have direct transfer of native Circle token in any chain, of course, where possible.
And I think one thing that's super important for a user experience is less wrapped tokens, the better. Would you agree, Ben, that wrapped tokens, a lot of the time when they go from chain to chain, it's easy for things to get overcomplicated.
100%.
Yeah.
And also, we can add more that I forecast, at least in my opinion, and I would like to hear Luke's opinion on this, but thanks to technology like CCIP, in the next cycle, we are going to have many more governance tokens which will be natively minted cross-chain. So similar to USDC from Circle, you could decide to build your project and have the governance token being minted in different chains thanks to CCIP.
Yeah, indeed. So fully agree that I think the key thing that most people are realizing right now is that they need to have more ownership of the token contracts. Protocols, right? We have seen a lot of issues where protocols themselves don't have the ownership of the token contract, and therefore they would then struggle in terms of coordinating a cross-chain strategy that allows a better user experience. And what then happens is you have too many rep tokens, representation of that token across different chains. Just give an example, you see that for USDC, and that's the reason why they came up with CCTP, right? Was the fact that back then, I think back in the day, Avalanche was popping up, right? And there's need to bridge USDC across to the other networks, including Avalanche. And then you see various different formats of USDC, right? So you have USDC.E, and you have the native USDC. But then the USDC.E, most of the USDC is locked in a smart contract on a chain like Ethereum, right? Which then creates more of an issue as you have more and more locked assets, right, into that smart contract. And I think that's the reason why they also realized that with this approach, they have less control in terms of the USDC that's minted out there. And with that, they decided there's a need for USDC to be more natively cross-chain, where they have the control, and that's where they would then do things like CCTP that's put into place. Following up on Ben's point, CCIP will integrate CCTP under the hood. So when protocols use CCIP, they can not just transfer USDC, but they can also incorporate the messaging solution of CCIP to instruct what to do with the USDC on the various chains. And that is not possible with CCTP alone, right? So I think that's the benefit of having tokens across different chains and then being supported as a supported asset on CCIP, where your tokens can be composable, meaning any DeFi protocol that's using CCIP, right, can then also tap into your token and then build use cases on top of which, right? So I think we see like the traction cross-chain direction going this way, where with that you have less rep assets, right? There's a lot more coordination on what the native token would be, right? And on the contract, the token issuer side of house, which is the protocol, right? There is less reliance on having your asset locked up in smart contracts in many different places, right? Where you don't have visibility. If you need to do a token migration, it will be a huge pain, right? But let's say when you're holding on to the token contract ownership, right, then you're not vendor locked into any particular solution.
Right. And the thing that we want to avoid, I guess, is further fragmentation. Like you mentioned, we don't want just token, and then you have like A token, B token, C token, token E, token F, token G, by which I mean all these derivative versions of it. Because the problem is, of course, that when you are building a liquidity pool, you have to specify the exact token that you need. And if these, important liquidity tokens or pieces of collateral are split between many versions, it becomes further difficult to bring it all together and actually centralize the liquidity, in which would allow larger players to come and use the protocol. So that's why, technology like CCIP is going to be so important.
I think one point that we can reflect also regarding this specific use case is that also when considering listing on exchanges of tokens that are potentially on multiple chains, then you need to have the exchange selecting the different network. But indeed, having this type of technology would simplify a lot for the exchange themselves. For example, the withdrawal or the deposit from multiple networks, because by leveraging this new minting and burning mechanism, it is much more easier.
I want to ask you too a question which I had written down in preparation for this podcast. I'm going to send it to Ben first, and I'm going to send it to Luke, or maybe Luke, you can reply to Ben. So Ben, what are some new trends or innovations in DeFi that have made an impression on you lately? What do you think will be a big talking point, over the next year or two?
Yeah, I think, of course, we mentioned before DeFi, the new cross-chain narrative, which for me will be extremely important. But as well, I think that we are going to have a massive growth in RWA, in real-world tokenized assets. And also there, knowing the many projects that are in the build program, also using CCIP and the Chainlink's technology, I really see how this would spike in the next year. There are so many good projects being built using those technology, especially because if we think, for example, CCIP, the way it connects also to traditional finance, for example, with Swift, those use cases will be much more powered from certain integration, right? And potentially I would see more of a switch towards merging between the permissionless market and permissioned market, because this type of use cases that power real world assets are in many cases connected to regulation. But as well, the permissionless side of DeFi is kind of adapting to that in order to be able to welcome those assets. And let's imagine a lending protocol like Fox Finance, how powerful will be to have as a collateral real world assets. That's what we want to bet on as well.
What do you think, Luke? What are some of the new trends in DeFi which are standing out to you these days?
Yeah, 100%. I think Ben and I probably have the same views here. So I think real world assets is the space to watch, right? And I think largely we would see, and what I'm really excited about is really more so in terms of the real world use case and the adoption of the blockchain technology in the long run. And what do I mean by this, right? So you see traditional financial institutions have been looking into the space for quite a couple of years right now, right? But what excites me is the fact of the rate of product innovations on their end, right? So they're not just just talking about it, writing reports about it, but they are actually launching products on it, right? So if you look at PayPal as an example with the PYUSD, that's only one example, right? You look at the current work that we have done with ANZ, right, where they tokenize green assets and bridge it across different chains using CCIP, right? And this is on public chains as well, right? this is a very good case study of the fact that within those organizations and banks in general, it's not just another innovation project on their end. They are really looking into this by having dedicated manpower, dedicated team that is building out their products using the blockchain technology. And why exactly is that important for us? Right? I was just looking at some data points, and this has been on my mind for quite some time. If we look into the DeFi market right now, it's right now I think it's a 43 billion market. And if we look into the crypto market in general, it's a 1.3 trillion market. One bank alone, which is what I mentioned, let's give an example of ANZ, right? It's one of the leading banks in Australia. It has a 1 trillion AUM, right? You look at the global stock market, it's a 109 trillion market. And let's not just talk about derivatives, right? Which is in the quadrillions, right? So largely what's important here is the fact that suddenly the blockchain industry from a 42, 43 billion industry could potentially grow into in the hundreds of trillions of dollars of industry, right? And if this is then used right, then this exposes a lot of people into really using blockchain technologies out there. And that's also where the overlap between permission chain and permissionless chain, public chains out there would grow, right? And that's where our entire industry will grow. So very, very excited about the entire RWA space, right? Another one that I'm also looking into would be, for example, the cross-chain space, which I've already elaborated upon, and hugely excited at the synergies between the projects in the build program. Because really the core essence is we see a lot of exciting teams and very, very promising teams. And we're trying to build a community of builders here and fostering synergies between all parties. And then the other one would be something that you guys have already been a massive part of, which is the LSD market, right? So like we see a lot more of LSD5 protocols that's coming up as well, right?
LSD being liquid staking derivatives.
Yes, indeed.
Just to clarify for the audience, yeah.
And I think that's where new DeFi primitives is being built on top of LSD assets together with real world assets. And I think that is really where we see a lot of product market fit at this point in time. A lot of innovations being built out within the space, and I'm highly excited for that.
It really speaks to how far the blockchain industry has come, that we're very, very close to being legitimized and standing alongside or working along with traditional and historical centralized financial institutions and other institutions as well. There are a lot of use cases for blockchain beyond finance, which, that's a whole nother conversation. I think it's almost time for us to wrap it up. It's been an incredible, 45 minutes or so. And is there anything, Luke, that you want to leave us with before we do the final statements? I just want to say thanks for joining us.
Yeah. I realized we spoke quite a bit about CCIP, cross-chain use cases, and hugely excited about the entire space. What I probably want to also shed a bit of light would be the build program that we have, right? So I think right now it has just passed the 1 year mark of the build program. So we kickstarted that sometime in late September of last year, right? Till then, I think we've seen a lot of very, very promising, brilliant founders, projects that has really come into the build program. I think now we are 70 odd projects in the build program, right? And really the key goal about the build program here is the fact that we want to work on a much closer level with projects that we want to grow alongside with, right? And ultimately, I think this excites me, right? So this Twitter Spaces excites me because we see a crossover of our community, right? Between both parties, right? The Folks Finance community as well as the Chainlink community. both getting to know what each other is building, discovering synergies that way, and really that's where we build our community around each other, right? And then we see a lot more overlap between how our community can be part of Folks Finance community, vice versa, together with the fact that there are so many different DeFi protocols, gaming protocols, infrastructure protocols that is within the build program, and all can support each other. And that's really where I really do think that the build program is something that I'm very, very excited about as well, right? And with that, I'm very happy to get this opportunity to work on a much closer level, align incentives among every single one of us, right? And then that's where we will basically be there to create the next wave of innovations and get the next wave of users coming on board.
Yeah, I think I can strengthen your last statement, Luke, because even though we are one of the newest part of the build members of the build program, I can tell that attending 3 events all over the world and continuously meeting in the build dinners all of the projects, it's very beautiful the way you're trying to create a family that you push us to collaborate to each other. And I honestly suggest if there is any project in the audience that is listening and is using Chainlink in any of the services, should probably talk to Luke about build. That's a very helpful ecosystem.
Definitely agree. Go ahead.
Just one. And likewise for the Chainlink community that's here, right? I think we got to show more love and attention into like Folks Finance. They have been building. I've been working alongside with them for, I would say, since the start of this year, right, or the past couple of months, and they have been fantastic, right? It's hugely exciting. I'm not sure how much I can speak into it, but it's hugely exciting what they're building, and they're a very, very professional and experienced team. Given their experience already within the Algorand space, so keep a lookout on the developments on their end as they go into the EVM side. A lot more overlaps and synergies with what we are building as well. And I'm hugely excited. Obviously, can't speak much about it, but once staking comes up, I think that's where the economic incentive alignment between Folks Finance and our community here is all to the fact that we want each other to succeed in the long run.
Thank you so much, Luke. It was great to really have you here. I would say that we should have a new Twitter space with Luke and the Chainlink community as soon as we hit mainnet or testnet, right?
Definitely. Luke, you're always welcome back on the show. It was amazing to have you here. Your insights were really phenomenal, and I personally learned a lot. I hope everyone else in the audience did as well. Thank you for coming and showing up and bringing the Chainlink community to introduce themselves to us. Let's wrap it up. If you want to listen to this podcast, you can find it on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts as well. Just look up Folks and Friends, or if you're on YouTube, look up Folks Finance. It will be there. We have other episodes as well. Check out our app. Folks.finance is the website. You can find various information there. Of course, you'll get linked to the app as well. Check out Folks Academy. We have a lot of educational videos there. academy.folks.finance. And of course, if you just want to keep it simple, you can follow our X profile. Keep up to date on what we're building. We will have a lot of updates coming soon regarding how we're integrating Chainlink into the cross-chain lending protocol. And I just want to say thank you to everybody who came to and listened to the space today. Welcome to our new Chainlink friends. And thank you once again for showing up. We will see you on the next episode. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.